Okay, we are in the middle of the whole story of Rebbe Nachman's journey to Eretz Yisrael. Last week we began about his decision to go. How much was it last week? No, 2 weeks ago we spoke about his decision to go. How much it was a struggle, how much it was a big shock to the community and to his family. And we saw his determination. We saw that, and we learned a piece in Likkutei Moharan based on Bechira Chofshit, that when a person realizes that, a chassid once asked Rebbe Nachman, what does it mean to have free will? He says, very simple. If you want something, you do it. If you don't want it, you won't do it. And Rav Nosson said it was very important to write these words down because quite often we think, I want to do something so badly, but it's not, I can't. Rav Nachman says, if you want to do something so badly, you will. You will end up doing it. And Rebbe Nachman sets out on his journey to Eretz Yisrael on Lag BaOmer of that year. I think it was 1798, if I remember correctly. But I just wanted to give you two quotes today, two important quotes from Rebbe Nachman on Eretz Yisrael in order to just get our heads in the right place. I'm sorry I don't have this printed for you, but just two short quotes from Rebbe Nachman from Likkutei Moharan. Rebbe Nachman speaking about Eretz Yisrael. And one of them is from Torah Reish Lamed Daled, the 234th teaching in Likkutei Moharan. Rebbe Nachman says, Ki Eretz Yisrael hu klalius hakdusha shebechol adorot. It is the generality, the general sense of holiness that's in all shebechol hakedushot, that's in all holinesses. Zot omeret. That whatever in the world you could imagine and think about kedusha and whatnot, that is, Eretz Yisrael is the headquarters of kol hakedushot. And then he says in Torah Kuf Nun Hey, v'tzarich kol adam levakesh me'Hashem yitbarach, and this is very important. Hopefully we'll see a whole tefillah that Rav Nosson wrote on this statement. Tzarich kol adam levakesh me'Hashem yitbarach, sheyeh lo kisufim v'gaguim le'Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Nachman said, I'm not talking about getting to Eretz Yisrael, but every Jew has to daven to Hashem that they should want to come to Eretz Yisrael. That they should want to come to Eretz Yisrael. That's a klal. Every Yid has to daven for that. V'gam, he writes, sheyed gaguim lechol tzadikim le'Eretz Yisrael. And we should daven that tzadikim should long to want to come to Eretz Yisrael. It's a pretty, in my opinion, one of the most prophetic statements in the world. Sheyel gaguim lechol tzadikim le'Eretz Yisrael. That there should be gaguim amongst the leaders and the righteous people, that they should have kisufim, that they should be longing to go to Eretz Yisrael. And then finally, the last quote, Likkutei Moharan Chaf, Mi sherotze liot ish Yisraeli. It doesn't mean whoever wants to be Israeli, the way we understand it. You understand? Ish Yisraeli, Rebbe Nachman referred to a Yid quite often as Ish Yisraeli, an Israelite person. I'm sure there's Torahs on this also, why Dafka he chooses this wording of Mi sherotze liot ish Yisraeli and not Mi sherotze liot Yehudi. Mi sherotze liot ish Yisraeli. Whoever wants to be a real Yid, which means, what does it mean to be a real Yid? Hainu sheyelech midarga ledarga. That you're climbing the ladder, that you're growing, there's an evolution taking place. Rebbe Nachman says, I efshar ela al yidei Eretz Yisrael. You can't be a real Ish Yisraeli, and you can't be one that's in constant motion of growing, of evolving, going from level to level. You can only do that through Eretz Yisrael. You know, it's very rare by the writings of the Hasidic Rebbes of his time, Bichlal, in general, to speak like this about Eretz Yisrael. There was no one that spoke about Eretz Yisrael from the Hasidic Rebbes the way that Rebbe Nachman did. And therefore, he sets out on that journey on Chai Iyar, and the Hasidim say, we could try to stop him, but we see there's no way he's stopping. There's no way he's not going. Now, again, to put things into context, back then, there were massive, long world wars non-stop between countries and nations, and especially all over this region and the region north of here. It was really, really a sakanat nefashot. It wasn't like, oh, I hope he takes care, he sleeps well, so he has koyach to be alive when he gets there. It was sakanat nefashot. Now, today it's will be a little bit different than we usually do, because there's so many details that I want to share with you that have a common theme about Rebbe Nachman's journey to Eretz Yisrael, and there's so much written about this in Shivchei Aran, in the writings of Rav Nosson, writing this and documenting everything that he heard, both from the person that was with Rebbe Nachman, who's still a mystery who that Talmud was. Well, I actually was shocked that I learned this week that there's a whole Masoret in Breslov that it wasn't this Talmud Reb Shimon that we mentioned before, but rather that he lost the gig. I'm not sure how he got disqualified, but that it was a Yid named Rebbe Yitzchak, who wasn't one of the biggest Talmidim of Rebbe Nachman, which is part of the whole mystery of this trip. And he was the brother of Reb Chaikel. Reb Chaikel was a big figure. I hope we get to speak about him as well. And he plays a very interesting role in Rebbe Nachman's journey to Eretz Yisrael. Now, there's just so much. I'm going to give over a lot Ba'al Peh today, so I just want you to pay attention, but we'll hopefully also get to see something inside. So the journey, Rebbe Nachman was starting out in a place called Medvedevka, like we've mentioned before. That name will pop up in the middle of the story again. And from there they set their journey to the town of Nikolaev. That's where back then that you had to get there in order to then travel to the way to get to Eretz Yisrael then was mainly through Istanbul, through Turkey. Reminding you, they're not in Turkey, they're in Ukraine, Russia, whatever you want to call it. These are long, long journeys. There was one stop there before that, which was Odessa. From Nikolaev, they had to go to Odessa, and then from Odessa to travel to Istanbul. Now, Rebbe Nachman tells his shamis to make sure buy a lot of paper. Make sure you bring a lot of paper with you. And as soon as they got onto the boat, Rebbe Nachman goes into his, I don't know. It's beautiful to say he went peacefully into his cabin where there was a cup of tea and a lamp and some spa music on the surround sound. Rebbe Nachman goes and sits down and starts writing Torahs, but he warned the person with him, traveling with him, you can't look at anything that I'm writing in here. I'm warning you. I know you're going to be tempted to. You're not allowed to look at anything that I'm writing in here. And he had to promise him, and then he promised him, and then Rebbe Nachman gave him a key to the room as well. But only once he promised that he will not look at anything that Rebbe Nachman's writing in there. Now, as they were leaving Odessa, this is very beautiful. At that time in Odessa, his name was already a shtickle known. People knew about him. And there was an entourage there. A lot of people came. He was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Maybe he had, thank you. Maybe he had some Hasidim as well with him. I'm not his own Hasidim. But the Lashon is, Nasu acharav kama agalot. Some wagons were following him. Velivu oto b'shir b'mishteh v'simcha gdola me'od. They escorted him with nigunim, with singing, with dancing, with l'chaims, as he went onto the boat in Odessa, and from there they traveled to the Yam HaShachor. How do you say Yam HaShachor in English? The Black Sea. And of course, what's the first thing that takes place? I'm not saying every single detail, I'm going to give you the basic story. What's the first thing that takes place when they're on the Black Sea? There was a Ruach Sa'ara. There was a Sa'ara for 4 days, where people were fainting, people were getting very, very sick. Many people there felt like like whoever was on this boat felt like this may be the end. Rebbe Nachman doesn't stop for 1 second to keep his eye on the prize. There's no hesach hadas. Rebbe Nachman continues to say, very focused on the journey Rebbe Nachman knew. And we spoke about this 2 weeks ago. Rebbe Nachman knew that there was going to be tremendous bilbulim and meniot to get to Eretz Yisrael. So this was no shock to him. I guess it was no shock to his Talmud as well that came with him. But Rebbe Nachman spoke about this, that the path to Eretz Yisrael is filled with bilbulim and meniot. Maybe he'd say today, and the path to stay in Eretz Yisrael is filled with bilbulim and meniot as well. but this boat came out overturned and nothing happened. Like he didn't stop. He just stayed in his room. There was a huge pachad, and people couldn't sleep at night. Rebbe Nachman sticking to his own. 4 days later, they finally reached Istanbul from Odessa, and they had no idea once they got there, like, where do you go from here? I guess they had to wait then. I'm not sure how long, but they had to wait until another boat would come and take them to Eretz Yisrael. The reason why they were nervous to try to figure out how to rent a place or find a place to lodge is that back then, they couldn't tell the difference between who's a Yishmaeli and who's a Yid. The levush was very much common. It was the same thing. When you look at pictures of Jews back here in Yeshua Yashan, also the Jews, if you look at pictures of Yidden back in like the late, unless they had payas, right? And maybe if they had a long beard, I don't think Yishmaelim necessarily have long beards as an Indian. This was the way of the culture. The culture was, they looked the same. And the Rebbe didn't know they couldn't tell who's a Yid and who's not a Yid. They didn't know what to do. But they did find an interpreter. They found a meturgeman while they were there, Rebbe Nachman and his Talmud. And he was the one that came and brought them to a place and say, this is a good place for you guys. And Rebbe Nachman felt this person's trustworthy. And this was a long journey, and they were so tired, and it took a while to find this place, but they finally found the place. And after a few minutes, Rebbe Nachman says, yeah, this is not going to do. It's not shaykh for me to stay in this place. The Rebbe says, so the Talmud listens. He didn't really explain what was going on. But then this person, this meturgeman, said, you know what? There's a place in the city of Istanbul that, like within the city, that it's an all-male zone. There's no women there. And Rebbe Nachman's like, yeah, that's where I'm going to go. I guess that area was filled. Rebbe Nachman is, what do we understand? Again, I honestly feel ridiculous sharing a lot of this without saying or learning with you like deep Torahs on every single detail of the story, like they do in Breslov. But just to remind ourselves, we're speaking about Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. We don't understand anything. But this we could actually understand. If he's not used to living in a mixed crowd of people, and the guy is telling him there's an all-male section within the city, so Rebbe Nachman says, yeah, that's the one we're going to go to. And the person also said, you should know there's some shluchei derabanan, Eretz Yisrael. There are meshulachim that are from Eretz Yisrael that are also there. And they're about to go back to their home in Childlike, and Rebbe Nachman's going to Eretz Yisrael. They're leaving Eretz Yisrael. That was the way to leave to Eretz Yisrael, to stop in Istanbul, and they're meeting in the middle of the way. And Rebbe Nachman, when he heard that there are shluchim derabanan that are traveling back to, I'm not sure where, somewhere in Ukraine, somewhere in Russia. So Rebbe Nachman went back to his Talmud and said to him like this, Ani mazir otcha, I'm warning you. Leval tegale oti klal, do not reveal who I am to anybody here. V'lo tagid klal mi anochi im yishalu alai. And if anyone asks me who I am, or as they ask you who I am, you cannot reveal my identity to anybody. Again, very mysterious, but this was just like he told the Talmud, do not look at anything as I write in these Torahs. He says to him also, do not reveal my identity to anybody. That's what the Rebbe wants. That's what ended up happening. Right as soon as they got to the city, they got there and they met these two shluchim derabanan, and of course, right away, they asked the meshamish, these meshulachim asked the Talmud. He said, what are you doing here? So they said, the story is that the shamis, let's say it was Rav Yitzchak, he was identified by some of these shluchim, some of these meshulachim. They recognized him, they knew him. So they said, hey, what are you doing here? So he said, I'm traveling with this young man, with this Yanuka, with this young kid. He wasn't that old, right? He was in his 20s. I'm traveling with him to Eretz Yisrael. And then they asked him, who is this guy? And he said, it's a person that has an Austrian, he's representing the Caesar of Austria, something like that. And he didn't want to reveal who he was, just like Rebbe Nachman said. And then they smelled that something's fishy here. So they started to have a taina. Now this taina that they have on him is interesting when we're learning the history of Hasidus. Remember, we learned that the first two pioneers that made Aliyah from the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov was Reb Mendel of Vitebsk and Reb Avram of Kalisk, Reb Avram Kalisker. And a machloket erupted at that time regarding chalukat ha'ma'ot, the distribution of tzedakah to people that are in Eretz Yisrael. There was a machlokas in terms of the distribution, where it went to, who was in charge, v'chulei. These meshulachim that just came from Eretz Yisrael, they had a sense that this young person over here is coming to wage war, not real war, but to basically come and have a taina on Reb Avram of Kalisker, which Rebbe Nachman had nothing to do with that whole parsha at all. Bichlal. It has nothing to do with him. And they started having tainas on him because he was so mysterious and not answering any questions that they asked him in a clear manner. And they asked the shamus, does your friend over here, the person that you're traveling with, have any documentation that he's traveling with to come and show support against Reb Avram Kalisker? He says, no, he has nothing like that over here. So they said, so why is he traveling? Finally, the Talmud said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know his real kavanah. But they didn't trust him. And they felt that Rebbe Nachman and this guy were cheating them. And they said, we knew you to be a kosher Yid, but you're acting very strange, they told this Rebbe Yitzchak. We're not sure how much we could trust you. And they had to spend some time together. But they knew that he was a Talmud of a Yid named Rebbe Nachman of Medvedevka at the time. It was before he got to Breslov. So these Mishulachim asked him, they said, did you ask Rishut from your Rebbe Nachman, to travel with this guy? Right? They said, absolutely I did. Right? But they didn't trust him because they really saw this person who was Rebbe Nachman as a very shady guy, and that he's going to Eretz Yisrael to bring machlokas. Okay? This is what Rebbe Nachman began to go through on his journey to Eretz Yisrael. So they said, forget the shamus. Let's go to Rebbe Nachman himself and ask him a few questions. Well, let's go to this guy. Let's go to this young, skinny, frail, mysterious guy and ask him what's up, what's the story. We'll ask him where he's from, where is he from, but he didn't want to reveal anything. And they tried to then speak in learning, and they saw they're not getting anywhere like that. And when they started trying to get him in Torah, they realized he's outsmarting them on every question they're asking, which was again a big pella. But they felt like he's just manipulating them mentally, and it just got to them even more, till they just they kept on saying, we're giving up now, but they had in them, they need to find out who this guy is. So the problem was, every time Rebbe Nachman appeared as a different person. Like one day they asked him if he's a Kohen, and he said yes. Then the next day at Kriyas HaTorah, they called him up for Shlishi, and he accepted the Aliyah, that he wasn't a Kohen. So they said to him, excuse me, you told us yesterday you're a Kohen, but today you got Shlishi Aliyah, right? He said, well, a Kohen is the Midah of Chesed, and Yisrael is a different Midah, and Baruch Hashem, I have both of those Midas inside of me, meaning these were the things that were happening the whole time. It drove them crazy. And they started hating him, and they were starting to mevaze him, to disgrace him and humiliate him. And Rebbe Nachman didn't stop from what he was doing, because he knew that this, as we'll see in a second, this meant that he was on his way to really get to Eretz Yisrael, because of all these minias and because of all these bizyonot. So finally, when he saw that they're struggling so much, trying to crack the code of who he is, he says the following statement to them. Zot tedu, shebevadai lo agale ikar kavanat nesiyati l'Eretz Yisrael. Just know, I will definitely not reveal the main purpose of my journey to Eretz Yisrael. Ki milibi lefumi lo giliti, because it hasn't been revealed from out of my heart. But nonetheless, va'af al pichen, ma tov u'ma na'im shevet achim gam yachad. Why do you have to know everything? Isn't it just beautiful that brothers are sitting together right now? Rebbe Nachman says, "Af al pi shelo yeda echad ikar kavanat chavero." Even if the brothers that are dwelling together don't know exactly the kavana that's with every other person that they're sitting with, Isn't that thing on its own just a valuable, beautiful thing about life? I don't know how they took that, but that's what Rebbe Nachman said. I don't know how they took it. And he continues to suffer so much, and he kept on, again, this identity change. He kept on saying, once he said he was from Italy, then he said he was from the Himalayan mountains, meaning he kept on saying different places nonstop. One time he spoke to them, and it sounded as if he was describing himself as the Kamarna Rebbe. And the whole story about that kesher, but as he was talking about the Kamarna Rebbe, describing that he was like the son of him, he started like cursing the Kamarna Rebbe. So they stopped and they said, "Wait, isn't he your father?" And he walked away. And then they realized, this guy's driving us nuts. But that was really something they really was irking with them. And he kept on saying different names of who he was, but they knew the son of the Kamarna Rebbe, his name was Yeshaya. So they wanted to check to see, when you call someone by their name, they naturally move, right? They actually matim et atzmam. So they said, Yeshaya. And he right away showed up, and like right away he came and showed up, and they said to him, "Oh, you actually are the son of the Kamarna Rebbe." And he looks at them and he says, "No, I'm really not." This was happening nonstop. So Rav Nosson says, "Kol ma she'avar b'inyan ze yiktzeru hamon yiriyot lesaper." There's not enough ink in the world to describe what really took place on this journey. But all I could tell you is that sometimes he would wake these people up while they were sleeping and started talking to them about different inyanim, and that really drove them crazy as well, till they reached the place that they would just sit there and curse this guy. They would curse out Rebbe Nachman. They were so sick of him. Now, there's a whole story about, I want to get to I'm debating what to do. When Shabbos came, they didn't agree for him to come and sit and eat with them. Only they had a sheichet, so Rebbe Nachman had to go through a whole Shabbos without eating any basar. Again, I can just imagine the portion of Rebbe Nachman's fleishik Shabbos meals when he had basar. We're not talking about anything remotely close to what we're used to, but obviously there's an inyan of eating barburim, slav, dagim. So that Shabbos, they mentioned, he didn't have anything, he just ate ma'achalei chalav, he just ate milchik. And on Shabbos, they had a big machlokis on him because they just wanted to push him out of that whole area, but he would show up and start sitting at the table that they made clear he's not invited to. And they started to fight with him, and they just, Pashut kept on trying to get him out of their sight because he drove them crazy. But Rav Nosson says, you have to understand, Klal hadavar hu asa bechavana. He did all this by purpose. V'hiniach atzmo levazot bechol minei bizionos. And he bechavana made himself suffer all these different mockeries and bizionos that he had to go through. And he told his Talmud that was with him, he says, understand something. Elu habizionos yeli tova gdola bahalicha ubachazara. What I'm experiencing right now will provide a tremendous help and good for me while I go to Eretz Yisrael and while I attempt to travel back home. This will more or less pave the path that'll be available for me to get to Eretz Yisrael and to go back from Eretz Yisrael back home. So Reb Nosson says, Lo hayalo be'efshari lavo liYisrael ki im al yidei katnos zos. Reb Nosson says, it was impossible for Rebbe Nachman to get to Eretz Yisrael unless he started acting like this. He needed to act like this. Kasher nishma achar kach mipiv beferush, that he speaks about this later on, saying the only way I was able to get there was when I started acting like crazy. ואמר שאם לא היו לו אלו הביזיונות והקטנות, לא היה לו באפשרי לבוא בשום אופן, ראה שהוא מוכרח להישאר שם באיסטנבול. He saw that there was a decree on him that he's going to die in Istanbul, that he's not going to be able to continue the journey. But this katnos and biziyonos that he took upon himself is what saved him and eventually got to Eretz Yisrael. Now, in Breslov, there's this whole parsha is a very big parsha. There's a lot of learnings that we do here. The question, of course, arises, is there ever a time for us to voluntarily act like this? Is this the way that is this the only way that someone's able to achieve higher spiritual great achievements? Like, is this the only way? So some in Breslov have acted like this, where they invite upon themselves hashpalot, humiliations. It's interesting. They used to do this in other Musserdiki yeshivas, like in, what was the story in Slobodka, I think? Well, there's many stories where in order to really mitahir the midos, you have to go through real big humiliation. So we know life provides that on its own, quite often. But sometimes when you do it bedavka, it invites it even greater. But Rebbe Nachman's whole energy and behavior is what's known in Breslov as hatzorech bekatnos, the need sometimes to voluntarily ki'ilu, like, go down, make yourself small, make yourself like a child, make yourself look like you're Meshugana. So we're gonna learn this. It's just a story about more details about what happened, and it was put together really nicely, where Rebbe Nachman, we'll see over here just a few more sides of this story that it will explain to us, I think, a little bit better how this worked, and really next week when we learn, we'll already get to his arrival in Eretz Yisrael, but this was taking place the whole time that he was on his way, mainly in Turkey, in Istanbul. This is very easy Hebrew. בדרכו אל ארץ ישראל שהה רבי נחמן בעיר איסטנבול, ובכל אותם הימים התנהג רבי נחמן בצורה משונה מאוד, acting strange, ועשה כל מיני מעשי קטנוס. He would act like a child, הלך יחף, he would walk around barefoot, בלי חגורה, without a girdle, בלי כובע לראשו, without a hat, על גופו לבש מין בטנה שנפרמה מאחד בבגדיו. He would, on his clothes, he sewed something like a patch that wasn't needed onto his clothes. וכך היה הולך בשוק כדרכם של נערים, הרצים בשוק ומצחקקים. And when you go to the marketplace, imagine him hopping or skipping, right? Acting like a kid. גם היה עושה מלחמות ומשחק עם רעיו בתכסיסי מלחמה. He would meet people and he'd say, hey, you want to play war? היו מכנים את האחד צרפת. And I'd say, oh, my name is France. What's your name? Germany, whatever the names were back then, right? כשם שאומות שהיו נלחמות בפוליון באותן השנים, just like, because that's what was actually happening, like we'll see, will have a direct effect on Rebbe Nachman's arrival to Eretz Yisrael. Napoleon's Mishigas is taking place then. וכך היו משחקים, and he got people to play. באותם הימים הגיע לאיסטנבול ספינה עם יהודים, וביניהם רבם של עדת חסידים. His cover is going to be blown. Because at that time, to Istanbul, a boat arrived, and amongst them was the Rev of a Chassidus. His name was Rebbe Ze'ev Wolf from Cherny, Austria. כששמע רב זאב כי רב נחמן נמצא בעיר, somehow, word got out, I don't know how, that Rebbe Nachman was in this town, שלח לקרוא לו שיבוא לאכסניה שלו, ויקבל שם את פניו באהבה, וכך יוכלו לגור יחד. He invited him. He said, my Hasidim set up shop for me here. I'm sure I have much better accommodations than him. So he sent a message out to find him and invite him to come and live with him. ולא רצה רב נחמן לבוא על מקומו של רבי זאב. He didn't want to come, אלא נותר בביתו ואמר, כאן טוב לי. He stayed at home. He said, no, it's good for me here. In the all-male section over here that he got, right? לא עברו ימים רבים ומגפת הדבר הכתה בעיר. How do you say dever? No, one of the 10 plagues. Pest, yeah? Okay. We'll stick with dever, yeah. Not a lot of days passed, and the dever a plague came to the dever. והגיע גם אל החאן. האכסניה שבה שרבי נחמן, it reached Rabbi Nachman's lodging as well. And because of that, בשם כך נאלץ לעזוב את המקום ולבוא אל אכסניה שבה שהה רבי זאב, and that's what got him to come to this Rabbi Zeev's place. When he came, כשבא עשה רב זאב סעודה גדולה לכבודו, ונהג בו כבוד גדול. He comes, he opens up such a feast for him and gave him so much honor, but למרות זאת, עשה רבי נחמן כמה מעשים שהיו נגד רצונו של רב זאב. But he was doing things against the will of Reb Zev. Ve'ulam, I can't even imagine what he was doing there. Maybe throwing food across the table or jumping on the chair. We don't know exactly. But, like it says in the Midrash, ahava mekalkelet et ashura. Love, basically, when you love someone, they can act meshuga. There's a place in your heart for them. Ubeshel ahava lo hibit Reb Zev ma'asim ha'elu, af she'itpalel me'od. So this Reb Zev is sitting there, he's like, I know you. And I know this isn't you, this is strange, but my love for you will not end, and that's it. וכך נהג רב נחמן, בכל עת שהרב זאב מתפלל, ועובר לפני התפילה כחזן בימי השבת, whenever the Rebbe would get up and be chazan, הוא היה מתיישב בחדר התפילה ואוכל. He would be sitting down there eating. נוהג היה להתפלל מוקדם יותר, he would daven much earlier, עד שבשעת תפילתו של רב זאב היה רב נחמן יושב ואוכל את סעודתו באותו החדר, וכך עשה בסעודת ליל שבס, ובסעודת שחריס, ובסעודת שלישיס. Every meal on Shabbos, when they're davening, Rebbe Nachman's eating. I'm sure this Reb Zev at a certain point realized, don't look too deep over here, this is a tzaddik yesod olam, there's something going on here I can't understand. He says like this, B'sha'at ha'seuda shlishit, likrat tzet ha'shabbat, as Shabbos is ending, during Shalosh Shudas, הזדרז רב נחמן לסיים את הסעודה, ובירך ברכת המזון. באותה השעה החל רב זאב לערוך את סעודת השבת. But, Reb Nachman is like, acting like, well, actually, Litvish Chaver they eat Shalosh Shudas? Yeah? No, I'm not talking about like the Shalosh Shudas that you have in shuls in America that's sponsored by, you know what I'm talking about? Like I grew up, my father was the cantor of these synagogues. I used to have to always go, and it was always people you've never seen before, but they wanted to give something, a donation to the shul in memory of their loved ones. So this people show up out of nowhere, and they have their names of their deceased announced, and they're there, and they give in covered, and Mizmar David, gefilte fish, gamarno. I'm talking about like real Shalosh Shudas, where you sit, nigunim. So by Hasidim, kimat no one ends on time. No one's running, checking to see if there's 3 stars out, to see if Shabbos is out. Reb Nachman was acting like that Shabbos. He finished right before Shabbos even came out, and then he went to daven Marav Bazman. This Reb Zev is just sitting down now to start his Shalosh Shudas. So again, באותה השעה החל רב זאב לערוך את סעודת השבת באריכות וביישוב הדעת, כדרכם של צדיקים חסידים מפורסמים, just like it was known that the Hasidic Yidden sit down to eat a seuda for Shalosh Shudas. בינתיים שלח רב נחמן לבדוק אם כבר יצאו הכוכבים, ושבת יצא. And they overhear Reb Nachman sending his shaman saying, check to see if there's 3 stars out and if Shabbos is finished. He never did that. והתפלל ערבית וערך את ההבדלה. And he davened Maariv, did הבדלה, אחר כך הדליק את מקטרתו, he lit his pipe, ובלי שלבש את כובעו ומעילו כנהוג, without wearing his hat and his jacket, which is the way he always was, נכנס אל החדר שבו ערך רב זאב את סעודתו והמקטרת בידו. This Reb Zev is sitting with his Hasidim in Shabbos at Shalosh Shudas, and Reb Nachman comes in with a lit pipe. מיד פנה עליו רב זאב בכבוד רב. Reb Zev goes to him with a lot of kavod. מיהר לברך ברכת המזון ולהוציא בעצמו את השבת. And instead of getting mad at him, he kind of got this simon of like, okay, I think I have to end my Shabbos now. It's end Shalosh Shudas, Birkat HaMazon, Avdallah, and right away, אחר כך דיברו ביניהם כמעט כל הלילה באהבה גדולה. And these 2 tzaddikim spent the night speaking to each other with great, great, great love. בכל אותם הימים המשיך רב נחמן להתנהג בקטנות ובדרך ביזיון. His whole journey was filled with this behavior. כך נהג גם כשהלך אל קברו של הצדיק רב נפתלי קץ, שנפטר בדרכו לארץ ישראל ונקבר באיסטנבול. There was a great tzaddik of the time that was traveling to Eretz Yisrael. He stopped there in Istanbul and he died there and he's buried there. Rebbe Nachman went there to daven by this tzaddik's kever. וכשחזר מן הקבר נפל פתאום על הארץ ושכב כך כמה שעות. He comes back from the grave of this tzaddik and he falls onto the ground for a few hours and couldn't move. אחר כך הניח אותו על המיטה ושכב כל הלילה, ולמחרת עד אמצע היום, and he couldn't move from his bed all night till midday the next day. כל אותו הזמן לא זע רבי נחמן, והיה נראה כמי שיצאה נשמתו. It looked as if he was dead. It looked like he was mamish, a dead person. עד שבעזרת השם קם ממיטתו וחזר לאיתנו, until it happened that he got his kochos back and he's all good. אחר כך, רמז רבי נחמן. Rabbi Nachman alluded to the fact that in those days, כי בימים שהיה באיסטנבול ריחפה מעליו סכנה גדולה, עד שהיה סבור שלא יצא עוד מעיר זו, אלא ימות בה. Rabbi Nachman sensed there was such a great danger for him, so much so that he was certain that he's never going to leave this city. He's never going to get out of here. Not only will he not reach Eretz Yisrael, he'll never see his family again, and he's going to die right there. That's what was clear to him. והשם יתברך עשה עמו ניסים רבים עד שניצל מן הסכנות. But Hashem did so many miracles until he was saved from the dangers. וכל מעשי הקטנות שעשה, הועילו לו מאוד שישאר בחיים. And all these acts of childlike behavior is what enabled him to stay alive. So here, this last paragraph will illustrate, will explain to us, just al derech pnimi, what is this all about? לאחר מכן המשיך רבי נחמן בנסיעתו אל ארץ ישראל. I don't mean to ruin the continuation of the story, but you obviously know that he got there. הוא בא אליה בשלום. לימים later, Rabbi Nachman said, כי כל כך הרגיל את עצמו בכל אותם הימים לעשות מעשי קטנות וביזיון, he trained himself, he got so accustomed to acting like this that it became his nature to act like a child. עד שכאשר בא אל ארץ ישראל, הוא רוצה היה להשליך מעליו התנהגות זו, והיה קשה עליו הדבר מאוד. So much so that when he reached Eretz Yisrael, he's like, okay, I don't need this anymore, because that was in order to get here. But he...
How long was he in Istanbul? A month, 2 months?
I think a few months. Yeah. I'll check. I'm not certain, but I think a few months. Mashu kazeh, but he said, I can't... But even if it's a few months, you're acting like this, if you're consciously choosing to act like this in order to achieve a certain inyan, and your nature, when you're a big Rebbe already, even though you're not an old man, and you're married already for 10, 12, 15 years, it's very strange that when you take upon this persona, that you can't rid yourself of it. I mean, I have heard of this, lahavdil elef alfei avdalas, by certain actors, that when they go into costume, even when the costume's off, sometimes the whole persona, you bring it home with you, you like this with other people, it's very hard to remove it from yourself. But we're talking about Rebbe Nachman of Breslov over here, and he's saying that when I got to Eretz Yisrael, and I'm like, okay, I'm done with this, now this katnos, I'm going to strip it away. It was very hard for him to do that when he got to Eretz Yisrael, which is very interesting. Third line, v'chol parashat nesiato v'aderech banahag, the whole inyan of his journey, and the way that he acted, הלא ידוע כי לא עמד רבי נחמן על מדרגה אחת. Rabbi Nachman wasn't standing still for a second. אלא היה עולה ממדרגה אל מדרגה. That's true about his whole life. He's in a constant state of ascending. Always. Even if it looks like it's a nefila, Rabbi Nachman's the master of teaching you. That's just a preparation for a stronger aliyah. You know, I have this great memory. One time I performed in a Reformed temple in Irvine, California. It was a beautiful Saturday night. I had a concert there. And I mentioned a teaching of Rebbe Nachman. I said, you want to do would you all be into like some Rebbe Nachman exercises? right? And they're like thinking, oh, great, meditate. I'm like, no, I mean like an actual exercise. Do you want to all do this right now? I said, sure. It's b'siyata d'shmaya. I didn't think about this. I just felt like, let's get it. Like, let me give them Rebbe Nachman, the little that I understand. So this is like 25 years ago. And I like to think I'm still young, but 25 years ago, I was very, very young, just starting to do these things. So I said, friends, I would love you all to please stand up. The whole, these, this chevra, they all got up, they all stood up. I'm like, okay, I would like you all to jump right now without bending your knees. Just jump without bending your knees. So they all tried and they saw you could barely move, right? I say, I would like you all now to bend your knees, like go down and then jump. So they did, and then they all jumped high. I said, thank you, please sit down. You've just experienced one of the greatest fundamental teachings of a great Hasidic master who explained that in life there is no other way sometimes of getting higher to the next level without first descending before that. And it stuck with me, and then I it's so much easier said than done, those, because when you're mamish in it and someone comes and tells you, when you're mamish in the dumps and someone comes and tells you, Rebbe Nachman said, you want to smack them. You don't want to hear that. But it is the truth. We see it all the time. The real ones are the ones that while they're suffering so much and they're bending their knees, they know I'm about to jump much, much higher. So Rebbe Nachman's in a constant state of up. He never stopped. וכדי שניתן יהיה לעלות אל מדרגה גבוהה יותר, in order to go to a much higher level, יש לרדת תחילה ולהיות איש פשוט לגמרי. Reb Nachman says, listen, Eretz Yisrael, the mochin of Eretz Yisrael, which we'll talk about next week, what Eretz Yisrael is all about, I need a tremendous jump in wherever I am right now. And whatever I think I've become and all that may work in Chutz La'aretz to do what I have to do. But Eretz Yisrael, I have to come down completely, not just down in suffering, but even in my mannerism, even in every way that I understood what it means to be a cultured human being in this world. I have to go back to a younger age. בשל כך היה עושה מעשה קטנות, כי חכם גדול היה בעניינים האלו. This is where it's coming from. He was such a chacham in these matters. ועמוק, עמוק, מי ימצאנו. Like the pasuk of Kohelet, this is basically the deepest depths. This is the deepest depths. Now this teaching is this common theme we see in Reb Nachman's journey towards Eretz Yisrael ties very much with the concept of that Reb Nachman says in 6th teaching in Likkutei Moharan, a person has to have, you know what Bakiyus is? להיות baki, thoroughly knowledgeable, right? So Reb Nachman says that a person has to have 2 schools of Bakiyus, where you're thoroughly knowledgeable of the matter. Baki beratzel, baki b'shov. So Rebbe Nachman speaks about this all the time. And as Chanasara's dear husband, Reb David Olav Shalom, was Yortzeit is coming up, would always say, he would sing the teaching that Reb Shlomo would sing about it. There's 3 things a person has to know, right? How to do. And I have this amazing recording of Reb Shlomo doing this, and I was once with Reb David at the kever, close to the kever of Reb Shlomo on one of the Yortzeits. I took a beautiful view of the second Yortzeit. Yeah, I have to find it. Yeah. It was the second Yortzeit of Reb Shlomo. It was 96, and I was there, and he sang it there, and it was so beautiful. I'll send it to you if you'd like it. But Reb Nachman speaks about, like, this world is not about mastering the art of of interpreting growth as this. Growth in this world means it's going to be like this. And if you know that, that means you already have to learn how to fall. Not that you have to fall, it's going to happen anyway. But you have to learn how to fall and come back down again, and you have to learn how to get back up again. What Rebbe Nachman, I believe, with this description of his journey to Eretz Yisrael, is teaching all Yidden all over the world what it means to come to Eretz Yisrael. What's waiting for you here in Eretz Yisrael. It's different than anything that we knew of before coming here. And we will see, we will see Bezrat Hashem next week that even when they got onto that boat in Istanbul and they're traveling to Eretz Yisrael, which isn't that far, oh boy, what happens to Rebbe Nachman. How crazy it was for him to actually get into the country, and why did he never make it to Yerushalayim? He travels all the way, and he never made it to Yerushalayim. Okay, we'll continue next week, Bezrat Hashem.